They'll come on, and you don't have to be very close to the speaker if you want to talk. If anyone's been in our if anybody wants to be in their member and traditional council chambers, you have to be really close to it. These microphones are brand new. You don't have to be that close to it. So the third button in, press the red light will come on, and then you just speak into that. And then when you leave, just press it again.
Good evening, members of council, members of the public here in attendance, staff, and members of the public viewing at home. We are here this evening on September 28th for the council public meeting to review the Affordable and Rental Housing Community Improvement Plan. We'll now call this meeting to order. The purpose of the public meeting this evening is to hear submissions regarding the proposed Town of Coburg Affordable and Rental Housing Community Improvement Plan, otherwise referred to as the CIP, which is being developed in response to the rising need of affordable and rental housing options within the Town of Coburg, and is intended to align with and help execute the recently released Northumberland County and Town of Coburg affordable housing strategies. At this time, I'd ask members of council if there's any declaration of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, I will turn it over to item number 4, the notification of the procedure, to the municipal clerk.
Madam Chair, I can advise that the notice was published in the local newspaper, posted on the municipal website www.cobourg.ca, and circulated to property owners in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act.
Thank you very much, Deputy Clerk. Moving on to item number 5, which is the explanation of the proposed Town of Coburg Affordable and Rental Housing CIP, the Community Improvement Plan. And I'd like to welcome Dana Anderson and Kelly Martel from MHBC Planning to present the draft plan for the Coburg CIP, including the background report, the executive summary, and panels analysis and a further presentation. Welcome back to Council Chambers.
Thank you very much, Councillor and members of the committee. We're very pleased to be here this evening to present to you the Community Improvement Plan for Affordable and Rental Housing for Coburg. We have a presentation and we'll be walking through and will certainly be available for questions. Through the presentation, I'm going to be starting off. And hopefully everyone can see that on the screen. Yes. I'll be starting off with a recap and an overview of the project itself and the work that we did leading up to the program, providing some information on the background research, also focusing and highlighting the community engagement that was undertaken with members of the community and many stakeholders in the county and in the municipality, and a little bit about the work we did and the steps we took for developing the CIP. With me this evening is my associate Kelly Martel from our firm, and she's going to provide you with an overview of the proposed programs, a little bit about each one, and speak about the importance of the implementation, monitoring, and the next steps. So with that, in terms of a recap and project update, I don't think we need this slide because this was in relation to the issues with COVID and where you could find some of the background information. But just a little bit of a recap for those who may have attended some of the past meetings. One of the first steps that we undertook was to provide information about what is a community improvement plan. And that's in the context of the Community Improvement Plan and its allowance under the Planning Act. A Community Improvement Plan is a plan that sets out incentives and programs for the revitalization, the redevelopment, and renewal of a particular area or area of focus through programs. And under the Planning Act, municipalities are permitted to adopt a bylaw in relation to community improvement plan areas and also programs and policies as set out in their official plan. And this provides a recap under the Community Improvement Plan in terms of objectives and programs, and also why a new CIP for Coburg. And certainly this CIP is focused on affordable and rental housing, and it really speaks to a number of reasons as listed here in terms of the current housing context, housing need, and certainly in response to the county's affordable housing strategy. In terms of a bit of a recap in terms of the project status, we began the project back in November of 2019, and we had a project launch in early December, and that may have been attended by many of you who are here this evening. Throughout the process, there were three main phases. They involved background information collection and analysis, and that commenced after the project launch. And that included also some initial engagement with the community through stakeholder meetings. We also very early on held a public open house and workshop, and we also had regular update meetings with both the PDAC committee, and you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, there were a number of occasions after each phase of the study where we met with PDAC to present information that we had collected in terms of our research and community engagement, and then we went into the next phase, coming back out again to get input and feedback from the PDAC committee. In phase two, this was the initial development of the Community Improvement Plan preparation, and that involved some initial drafting of the CIP. With the feedback that we received from the open house, we also presented this at an update to Committee of the Whole in March. And finally, we began refining the CIP, the implementing bylaw, and the programs in the last phase of the project. And this late summer, we provided information and materials that were available online, including a presentation which had been provided online, which folks could download and listen to, as well as additional information with the background reports that are all available on the municipality's website. And we're here this evening presenting at this statutory public meeting an overview of the program and next steps. In terms of our background research, the culmination of all of our background research and analysis is found in the Community Improvement Plan Background Report, which is also available on the website. And this background report provides research and analysis, really an overview of Coburg's existing housing context, provincial, county, and local policies that we reviewed and assessed in relation to affordable housing issues and statistics. We summarized all of the feedback we received at the different engagement points, and that is summarized in the report. And we also summarized the findings from our initial workshops in terms of key areas of focus, as well as key issues and concerns raised by stakeholders. One of the important components of our background report was actually a financial analysis that we performed in relation to various programs that are available under CIPs in a Coburg context. So we took examples of housing programs, housing developments within Coburg, and assumed various programs in place to see what impacts and effects those programs would have and what benefits they would have in relation to a CIP if it was undertaken for those projects. And that helped us to inform some of the final elements of the different programs that Kelly's going to speak to. And finally, we had identified in the background report some key areas of focus in terms of the CIP program, both specifically related to affordable and rental housing, but also some other programs that would continue to support affordable rental housing in the context of brownfield developments, accessibility, as well as sustainability features. So in our initial workshop, we brought forward 5 areas of focus as preliminary areas of focus. And based on our research, we identified these and brought these out further to the stakeholders and members of the public. And they really focus around 5 key areas that we see the CIP program under the Planning Act being able to support. The first being purpose-built rental housing, the second being smaller units, the third being second units or accessory units, the fourth being mixed income housing, where you would have a range of housing types based on not just market housing, but affordable housing and housing ownership. And finally, we looked at emergency and transitional housing and potential supports. So these were our initial 5 areas of focus. And those were summarized in our background report. In terms of project engagement, the project engagement for the development of the CIP has been quite extensive. As I mentioned, I won't go through all of these, but we've done a lot of initial work with the community, understanding concerns and needs and work that other community groups and stakeholders are undertaking in relation to programs for affordable and rental housing. We also included in our stakeholder interviews those who are delivering those forms of housing, both developers and also various housing groups, as well as meeting with the county's Affordable Housing Committee. Our workshop in January focused on looking at the areas for the CIP program, and we got great feedback from individuals at that workshop on various elements of the program, what they felt should be some priority areas. And we also discussed some other areas, as I mentioned before, that were linked to the housing programs, including sustainability, accessibility, as well as brownfield developments. We had provided updates to Council in January and March, and as I mentioned, provided materials online, which enabled members of the community to provide input and feedback. And now we're culminating that with the statutory public meeting this evening. So very briefly, our project launch event kicked off in December, and this is where we introduced the concept of a CIP, what it meant. And we also provided some programs that are provided in other affordable and rental housing CIPs across the province, and we had people identify whether those were of interest to them and how they might relate to the Cobourg context. And we got some great feedback from stakeholders and members of the community at that initial open house. And then we provided a summary of the kickoff information, and we fed that as well as our background information into our January workshop. And at this workshop, we provided individuals, we worked at large group tables, and we provided individuals with those areas of focus, and we asked individuals to read through the information, and then we had conversations related to that particular area of focus. So whether that was purpose-built rental housing or second units or mixed income, we asked a series of questions, and we had discussion around those questions as it related to that particular form of housing, and also how a CIP program may be able to increase the availability of those forms of housing. We also talked and heard a lot about the tiered approach to incentives, and this is where one particular program may be provided with additional incentives should someone be also providing for certain elements in terms of support for affordable and rental housing. And Kelly can speak to that in relation to some of the programs. In terms of the information we received through the publication of materials on the website, we received considerable feedback about the areas and priorities for the CIP. The online consultation ran between December 2019 and January 2020. And of the visits to the Cobourg CIP website, we received a variety of feedback on the background report, the different programs from various groups and individuals. And as mentioned this past summer and leading up till today, we've had online consultation and engagement provided through the website. And this is where information is found that people can download and review, including a summary presentation, similar to that which we're providing you this evening. We also used, and as did Coburg, various means of social media so that people could respond and provide feedback through those different venues. There were also several media interviews, and again, a lot of information provided with opportunities to click and provide feedback or call in and provide feedback to town staff. So in developing the CIP, we clearly had a lot of information, and as I mentioned, this was a phased approach. So as we were proceeding with identifying areas of focus and working out the details of the program, running some of the financial analysis on the different programs in the context of Coburg, we collected all of this information, including the background research, consultation, the town and county's objectives for housing in their policy documents, the financial analysis. That all fed into looking at these priority areas and starting to develop the CIP. And added to that consideration was additional consultation and our analysis of certain findings. So all of that fed into the draft CIP that we've prepared and that we presented through the summer consultation and that we're presenting to you this evening. So with that, I'll pass it over to Kelly, who's going to walk through the basic elements of the program and discuss some of the details. Thank you.
Good evening again, everybody. Nice to see you all in person. It's been since I think I was last here in March. So quickly, in developing the CIP, we did establish a purpose and vision, which are shown here on the screen. In terms of the purpose, we're identifying that the CIP will provide financial incentives designed to achieve community goals and priorities as set out in the county and town affordable housing strategies and official plans, with the intent to assist development of affordable and rental housing across the town. With the financial incentives aimed at creating affordable units within the town on an annual basis, consistent with the target set out for the town in the affordable housing strategy. In terms of a vision, what we're looking to achieve is to minimize financial barriers to the creation of affordable and rental housing in order to ensure that an appropriate range and mix of dwelling types across the housing continuum are provided throughout the town, as well as provide opportunities and incentives for the redevelopment of brownfield sites and projects that may incorporate sustainable design and or accessible design features. We developed a number of objectives to accompany the CIP, which are provided on this slide. Number one, facilitate the development of affordable and rental housing through financial supports. Increase the supply of affordable and rental housing units. Generate an appropriate mix of residential units and dwelling types. Make ownership housing more affordable to new home buyers and allow people to age in place through second units. Support and stimulate mixed income developments. Encourage the development of emergency and transitional housing. Assist in the achievement of the county's annual target for new affordable housing units. Reinforce the provision of affordable and rental housing as a community priority. provide opportunities to incentivize development and redevelopment projects on brownfield sites, and provide opportunities to incentivize development or redevelopment projects that incorporate sustainable design and/or accessible design elements. And in doing this, as Dan has said, we worked with the community at a number of sessions, both online and in person, to really take those 5 key areas of focus and turn them into priority areas, and a suite of programs to be provided through the CIP, which I will go through in the next few slides. In terms of priority areas, we had the 2 priority areas being purpose-built rental housing and second units, and there are a number of programs aimed at increasing purpose-built rental housing or second units throughout the town. These include the Rental Housing Planning and Building Fee Waiver Program, the Rental Housing Development Charge Grant Program, which is a tiered program based on a scoring system, Rental Housing Property Tax Grant Program, a Rental Housing Cash in Lieu of Parking Reduction Program. And then for the second units, we're proposing a planning and building fee reduction program, as well as a renovation and construction grant program. Now, as we know, there were 5 key areas of focus, and so what we found from the feedback was that the priority area really was getting the rental housing available on the market. However, we recognize there are a number of other important elements that should be contained within the CIP, and these would be the secondary areas of funding, which include emergency and transitional housing, affordable home ownership, brownfield revitalization, sustainable design, and accessible and universal design. And there are a number of programs designed to incentivize these elements as well. And in total, we are proposing 13 separate programs which would be available through the CIP, which could be combined. So briefly to describe the programs available for purpose-built rental housing, the planning and building fee waiver program could provide up to 100% of the fees paid on a specific planning and development application for affordable rental, being primary market or purpose-built primary market rental housing. The Rental Housing Development Charge Grant Program would be able to provide applicants with a grant equal to a percentage of the development charge payable on an eligible project. Again, proposing affordable rental or purpose-built for primary rental housing projects. And that this program, again, would be on a sliding scale where demonstrating achievement of certain criteria could result in a higher proportion of the grant. The Rental Housing Property Tax Increment Grant Program would provide a grant equal to the incremental increase in municipal property tax assessment resulting from improvements to existing development or the development of new buildings containing affordable rental, primary market, or purpose-built primary market rental housing for up to 5 years. And then the Cash in Lieu of Parking Reduction Program could provide a grant equal to up to 50% of the calculated cash in lieu of parking fee for purpose-built rental housing and purpose-built affordable rental housing projects where a municipal cash in lieu of parking program exists. And I should mention as well that in developing these projects, we really did look not only at the local level, but there's federal and provincial funding available for fund matching, and the projects would have to meet certain criteria. One of those criteria is that there is a commitment from the local municipality to provide a certain threshold of funding. And in creating these programs, we were trying to ensure that it was aligned with the provincial and federal requirements so that at the end of the day, an applicant for a large project in terms of rental housing or affordable rental housing would be able to access all the tiers of funding that are available. In terms of second units, we did introduce 2 programs. So the Planning and Building Fee Reduction Program would be up to 50% reduction of the fees for the application itself for second units or coach houses. And then the second program is related to renovation and construction projects for existing or new second units or coach houses, which could provide a grant equal to 50% of the eligible costs for a retrofit of a dwelling, up to a maximum of $10,000, or a loan equal to 70% of the eligible costs of the retrofit to include a secondary unit or the construction of a new coach house, and or the bringing up of an existing unregistered secondary suite to a legal code. And the ultimate funding could be between $50,000, with the minimum being $5,000. For emergency and transitional housing, we are proposing 2 programs be provided. First, the grant for the building and planning fees, and that would be at 100% of the fees paid. And the second would be the development charge grant program, and again, this would be a tiered system where an applicant could demonstrate certain criteria are achieved in terms of sustainability and accessibility, universal design. That would result in a higher proportion of the development charge grant being provided. For affordable home ownership, we did as well include 2 programs. The feedback we did receive from the stakeholders in the community on this was really that, again, the rental housing was the priority area, but we shouldn't discount people who may want to develop affordable home ownership units. And so we're proposing to have grants and the development charge grant program, but these are at a lesser tier and a lower value than if you were to provide affordable rentals. So the grant for this one would be 50% of the fees, and then the development charge one would be based on what the tier, it's a tiered approach. So if you're providing more elements in terms of sustainability and universal design that would allow for reduced billing in electricity, etc., that would provide you a larger grant. And again, there are 3 other programs we're proposing that are related to development of affordable housing in terms of brownfield redevelopment, universal design, and sustainable design. And these would provide a number of grants associated with the preparations of studies in the cases of the brownfield redevelopment, or in the universal design and sustainable design cases, it would be 50% of the cost of building improvements or eligible works for new development, or a loan instead of a grant between the maximum of $50,000 per project or the minimum of $5,000. And as well, these projects right now through this CIP are available for affordable and rental housing, but including them more broadly to be potentially applicable to commercial, institutional, and mixed-use buildings in the future allows an opportunity for council to consider at a later date providing funding for those key areas as well, though that would have to be through a different budget and a different fund, but including them here opens that door. In terms of implementation and monitoring, Dana, did you want to take this or? Sure. Okay, sorry, we're just going to do a quick trade.
So in terms of the implementation and monitoring, there's really two components to this. One is the administration and the financial management of the program. And as you may know, that there would need to be an annual budget for the CIP allocating funds for these programs that would need to be approved. This fund would be used to fund the development charge grants, the fee reductions, the waivers, second unit renovation, construction grants and loans. And reductions would be awarded for Planning Act fees, building permit application fees, and other municipal levy fees, and those would be absorbed as lost revenue as part of the budgeting process. Grants would be awarded for property tax release. Those would be recouped over time in the form of longer-term increased tax assessment and economic activity. And all of the programs would be funded by the town or in conjunction with other county, federal, and provincial programs. And one thing I wanted to note on that was we purposefully ensured that all of the programs that were listed here can be aligned and coexist with other programs, so that individuals who are seeking, for example, purpose-built rental housing can maximize all of the opportunities that are available through funding for all of those levels, and they wouldn't be precluded from other types of programs. They can also combine many of the programs that we're suggesting, so they may be able to apply to more than one. And any unused funding gets carried over into the following year and would remain in the same grant program within the CIP Reserve Fund. Quickly, in terms of implementation, the program itself would be administered by planning staff in consultation with finance and corporate services. The applications that are required for a person who is seeking the incentives through the CIP program, administration of that in terms of forms and how and when would be available online and also at the counter. One of the key aspects of this is providing support for those applications, providing information, and we'll speak to this a little bit just in terms of the next steps. The applications for some of the smaller scale projects would likely be delegated to the Director of Planning, whereas some of the larger projects or the larger funds would be part of an intake program, and that would come forward to Council for approval. And incentive agreements are required to ensure that what gets built is then refunded or allocated the program funds. The other important element that I mentioned early on is monitoring, and this is a program that we've established as part of the CIP that is really important in terms of a go-forward position to collect data on the various applications and the programs going forward, as well as monitoring and collecting and maintaining data on affordable and rental housing supply in terms of costs as well as rents and ownership costs. And so listed here is a list of the data that would continue to be collected. And as well, part of the reporting procedure for monitoring would be to come back to Council and identify what's happening, what have been the changes, what's the uptake on the programs, and based on the assessment of the effectiveness of the program. And that's both done qualitatively and quantified through the data. And the importance of this is to see, are there programs that are not being taken up, and why is that happening? And is there an overwhelming response to a particular program that stakeholders are advising is very successful and very helpful to them in moving forward the ability to supply affordable and purpose-built rental housing? And so there's a huge list of monitoring variables that would be collected under each program. I won't go through these in great detail. They're all there for your review, and those would include the other programs related to sustainability and design and the brownfield developments. So in terms of next steps, we look forward to listening this evening to members of the public and respond to any questions from committee. And we will be reviewing all of the input received this evening and refining the final CIP program and bylaw. And we look forward to coming back to the regular meeting of Council to present the final bylaw and programs to you. And with that, I'll pass it back to the clerk, I believe, or to you, Madam Chair, for any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dana and Kelly, for your thorough work and being here for this draft presentation. I too look forward to the questions and comments and input from both members of Council and those at home and in the gallery. Before we move on to public submissions, I will open up the floor to any members of Council who have any particular direct questions to the MHBC consultants on the draft presentation. My apologies, Councillor Turley.
Thank you very much. I can see you've put a tremendous amount of work into this project. I just have a question about the budget that Council will need to consider for the CIP Reserve Fund. I'm wondering, have you done a very rough estimate of the amount of funding that Council would need to approve to incentivize enough projects under this program to develop 38 affordable housing units per year, which is our target per year?
Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor, we have that information. I don't have it handy. I would defer to staff because we did that work and we do have an idea of the allocated budget that would be required to meet that target.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Chorley. Just a very rough estimate, and I think we need to cross-reference that with some of the data that has been prepared. We, in 2020, I believe, Council has had budgeted approximately $100,000 or $125,000. Again, I'd have to follow that up with some data. However, in past year, 2019, the town budgeted for $250,000, I believe, again, for affordable housing projects that were considered at that time: Trinity Housing, Habitat for Humanity, and Balder Corporation, with some deferrals. So I would have to say, you know, on an estimate to make it worthwhile would be probably around $200,000 to $250,000 range per year to build up a reserve in order to make enough quantifiable impact on that number of 38 units per year. If you recall, with Balder and Trinity Housing of Coburg, it involved a substantial amount of grants and securable loans, as well as deferral and waiver of development charges, which can, on a larger project of 27 to 30 to 40 units, is fairly considerable. So, Councillor Chorley, I could certainly get back to you with some exact numbers that I think we had done some analysis in the earlier part of the process, and I can certainly get that information for you, but thank you.
Thank you to the Director. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All along the same lines as Councillor Chorley's question, we are about to start working on the 2021 budget, and I believe in my review today, 125 does seem right, Director McGlashan, for the 2020 budget. You've presented an awful lot of different types of possible grants. I'm just wondering, in your community engagement, was there any one or two that seem to, you know, come to the top of the list? Because we certainly can't do them all. And I like the idea of putting forward a reserve until we have enough funds to do it correctly, as opposed to here and here and a little bit here. As we all know, 125 doesn't go very far, 250 doesn't go very far. We certainly aren't going to be building anything on our own with that, those kinds of funds, but we are going to try and leverage. So my question to both of you, and thank you for an excellent report, by the way. Obviously a lot of work went into this. Was there one or two that you think, I mean, you mentioned second units, and I'm just wondering what you think the best bang would be for council's deliberation as far as, you know, I know that will be planning and development, but I'm just wondering where do you think the best place to put these funds once we get to the budget process? Thank you.
So, thank you so much for that question. Through you, Madam Chair, to the councillor. The reasoning for going out to the community and looking at areas of priority focus, as I mentioned before, was to determine that there are some of the programs which would actually be undertaken by community members or individuals, such as the second units, and that we saw as a program that could help to deliver some affordable rental housing locally through local community members with the support that's available that wouldn't otherwise, someone might put off the potential of the required renovations to meet code to put in that type of a unit. So this really is an incentive that can assist individuals. So we see that as an area that would be very, I think, successfully uptake, as well as based on that program being introduced in other municipalities. It's been quite successful. But I think the other area is the direct funding that would be provided for programs for purpose-built rental. I think that's an area where, combined with many of the other programs and funding that are available at different levels of government, that you will see local developers coming forward and utilizing that to start really making a difference in terms of rental housing supply in the community. So I don't know, Kelly, you wanted to add any?
Yeah, no, I would agree with Dana. I think that when we went out to the community members really saw the second units as a quick win to get a few additional units online, on the understanding that purpose-built rental is a major priority, but the time in which it takes to get the development from, you know, your approvals to people in the units is a bit longer, that they're both of equal priority, which is why we had provided them in the primary areas and the others in the secondary, and they would work together where the second units could fill a gap while the new rental units are coming on. And so I think the feedback we received from the community was that those two were the major two to focus on.
Thank you. Any other members of council? Councillor Chorley?
I'd like to just ask you about the definition. There's two definitions there for affordable home ownership. And one of the definitions is housing for which the purchase price is at least 10% below the average purchase price of a resale unit in the regional market area. So I'm just thinking about Coburg, and one of our unique features is that we have a rail corridor running through the middle of our town. I'm just wondering, with this definition of affordable home ownership, does this mean that practically any development along that rail corridor would likely have a value probably 10% less than what would be average? Does that mean that really any development along the rail corridor would meet this criteria for a grant under this Affordable Housing CIP? And have you given any consideration to how we make sure that we don't just have affordable housing building up along the rail corridor, and that it's truly mixed income housing throughout the community?
That's a great question, and so I'll start and then maybe you can respond. But what we did do and what we heard back from the stakeholders in the community at every event was we really need to focus this on a town-wide basis. We don't want to direct funding to one specific particular area, but what's unique about the way that the CIP would work with the provincial and the federal funding is that in order for these developments to work financially for the developer, they do have to provide units at above market rent or at a regular rate to offset the costs it would for them to develop the affordable units. So what happens is that you end up with a mixed income building. So it wouldn't necessarily be tied to a locational area, but the rents or the purchase price of the other units in the building would offset the lower affordable rates. And because these programs have been structured to establish that the criteria for the town's commitment will be met at the provincial and federal funding levels, you would see a bit more of mixing rather than the concentration. And that was something that we thought was very important while we were looking into developing it, making sure it's a town-wide, not targeted in a certain area. And I think that a lot of the feedback we received both from the development community and the affordable housing community agreed on that.
And I would just add to that this comes back to the importance of monitoring the regional market, in this case the county, as well as the local market in terms of both resale and new. What you don't want to do is assume that a certain percentage of housing which meets that affordable criteria is only located in one particular area as a result of a particular context. And so we've tried through this program to ensure that that's not the case, and that these programs are available for a wide range of opportunities throughout the town.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Chorley?
This question might be more appropriate for Director McGlashan, but I noticed in your slide presentation there was a slide on approvals and that approval process. Can you help me understand a bit better how a small project would be defined compared to a large-scale project? Because from what I understand, the proposal is that the Director of Planning could approve small-scale projects but council would need to approve the larger scale projects.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Councillor Chorley. Through the process of developing the implementation plan, it was expected that smaller developments or smaller funding opportunities would be for the second suites program. So we would be looking at maximum of $10,000 per project, and out of the budget, we're hoping for maybe 5 to 10 projects for second suite retrofits. So the smaller developments would be limited to second suites, and other projects would be funding opportunities for purpose-built housing, larger projects. Okay, that would require council approval. Okay. Sorry, and if I may just, and as Ms. Martel indicated, typically second suites are those easy win situations where someone could come in for a building permit, ask for a retrofit for a secondary suite, and obtain a permit fairly quickly. So it was felt that rather than run through a report and a process through council, that would be a delegated approval, similar to what, say, a heritage permit would be for smaller alterations. That would be the intent.
Thank you very much. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I get this direct to Director McGlashan. You mentioned a couple things. One was the 10 to 50, well, I guess $10,000. Would those loans be interest-free? And the second part of my question is, if a homeowner built a second suite or a second unit, what would be the implications for their taxes, as opposed to, would they still be declared a single-family residence, or would they have to pay an increase in their taxes based on that second unit?
Through you, Madam Chair. With respect to the first question, I believe that was the interest question. That would certainly be council's discretion to waive interest on these types of loans. What has traditionally occurred as part of the downtown CIP process is that the town would actually absorb the interest loans as part of the approval. So we would recommend that the loan be part of the funding allocation for secondary suites particularly. Again, because they're typically individuals, homeowners, smaller players in the program that would be seeking to obtain funding from council. So that would be our intent, would be the town would fund that interest. I believe that was our intent there. In terms of the second question about taxes, each secondary suite improvement or retrofit would require a building permit, in which case the building permit data does go to MPAC, which is the assessor for tax purposes. So it's hard to say, maybe possibly Mr. Davey from his experience with MPAC, as to whether a reassessment from MPAC would actually increase the value of the property substantially enough to warrant a raise in taxes. As council knows, that payment of taxes is directly related to the value of your property. It's hard to say. I would say in terms of the retrofits that we have had in the last 4 years for second suites, since that program was allowed, the value of retrofits ranges anywhere between $20,000 and $150,000, just depending on the extent of that renovation. So it really depends on MPAC and whether they would reassess the property at a much higher rate than it would be as a single unit. But perhaps Mr. Davey might be able to help on that aspect.
How's that? Definitely any improvements to the property would increase the assessed value of the property, so there's no doubt that the taxes would go up, typically based on some sort of calculation based on the value placed on the building permit. So the value of the property would probably go up, the taxes would go up. But by adding a second unit, you're still well within the range of what's a residential property, so it's not going to change the tax class from residential to multi-residential, for instance, if you're just going from one unit to two. So the tax rate itself wouldn't change, so it would just be whatever value is assigned, because now obviously the property, if it were to sell, is worth more presumably than what it was prior to the renovation, the same as if any of us had an unfinished basement and we finished it. Now the property's worth more, so the property taxes are going to increase.
Any additional questions from members of council? Seeing none, I have two, if I may. One is probably best suited under the banner of monitoring, and I've had different forms of this from either when we were going through the public engagement process or since this has been back on Engage Coburg. And I'm just going to roll it up into a general question under the secondary suites. So homeowners can apply for some type of incentives. Under the monitoring, how can the municipality ensure that those participating in the CIP program are using their secondary suite for the purpose of affordable rental rather than using the CIP to essentially build, say, an Airbnb or a vacation rental?
So to answer your question, what we are proposing as part of the CIP is that there are a number of agreements that an applicant would have to enter into with the town in order to ensure that the units are affordable. So in the case of second suites, they would have to agree that it wouldn't be an Airbnb as part of the agreement, as well as ensure that it would be rented at a certain rate for X number of years. And that agreement as well would be for the rental, the purpose-built rental, like there would be in an agreement. There wouldn't be provided an opportunity to convert it to condo, and they would have to provide that for a number of years. I think for the purpose-built rental side, it's up to 20 years, and for the second suites, it would be up to 10 years, but we would have to double check the numbers. And then if through the monitoring, the town does realize that there is a contravention in one of these agreements, the monies would have to be provided back to the town.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And my second question, I've asked this in different forms at the PDAC level, at the advisory committee level, and just for council and the rest of the public. In addition to grants and loans, if there was a scenario where the municipality was either able to had land or identified a surplus of unused or vacant inventory, an unused building, for example, that could be repurposed into an affordable housing project, do you see that as fitting in through one of the recommended programs under the CIP, or is that a policy and program that stands separate from the CIP?
So I know there are separate programs that the municipality would take the initiative of. Depending on how that was implemented, if there was a partnership, there may be an opportunity to direct some incentives through the CIP. However, it's sort of the municipality borrowing from itself to access those funds. So they are somewhat separate. The one thing I would say is that there are, related to the types of programs that are out there from the provincial and federal government, we've tried to, as I mentioned before, ensure that the programs that the town has through its CIP would not conflict at all and would be able to be leveraged and maximized through that process. But I do believe, Councillor, as we've discussed before, those are separate programs.
But I would just add, we did, for clarity purposes, based on our discussions at the PDAC and through the other engagement events, revise the draft CIP to make it very clear that that was a potential possibility through other legal mechanisms outside of the CIP.
I appreciate that. To the director, did you want to add anything from a planning perspective?
So through you, or to you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so there is a specific section within the CIP that does allow for the donation lease or sale of surplus municipal lands at or below fair market value. Without the CIP, the municipality would not be legally allowed to, in accordance with the provisions of the Municipal Act. So that provision, as a result of the public and stakeholder sessions as well as the PDAC discussion, was added to the CIP to specifically enable council at its discretion, should it present itself, to provide that opportunity should the town have a parcel of land or building that it deemed to be surplus, and could offer another provider that opportunity to provide affordable housing.
Thank you very much. If there's no other final comments from members of council, move on to the public submissions. Dana and Kelly, thank you so much. Ask maybe to stay readily available should there be some direct questions from public or written correspondence that need to be directed to you as the project consultants. But as we move on to item 6 of the agenda, when you approach council at the microphone, just kindly state your name and the address that you reside at in Coburg, and this is for the official record of the public meeting. Before I invite members of the gallery forward, we'll do public submissions in support of the CIP, public submissions in opposition. But before I invite those of you who are attending us with us in the gallery, we do have some folks who are participating via Zoom to accommodate a hybrid of both in person and via Zoom. So ask for your patience. We're going to go to the folks who are online with us via Zoom right now, and then I will open it up to members of the gallery for those who are here to support or make comments on the CIP. Okay? Thank you very much, Adam. I appreciate you taking the time to raise some important parts of the draft CIP, as well as to add some creative ideas, especially in the realm of tiny homes. To the clerk, did Mr. White have any particular questions that he wanted responded to? Perhaps what we could do, oh, you can.
Through you, Madam Chair, members of council, the questions that Adam submitted appeared through email to you as well as written form. So he would just like those submitted as part of the record. He doesn't need comment on that. But if there's any comments that staff or the consultants would like to provide to him, he's happy to receive them.
Madam Chair, if I may, Mr. White's submission will certainly be reviewed by staff and the consulting team and form part of the report back to council for the final bylaw. So, Madam Chair, yes, we would gladly take Mr. White's submission and take it back with the consultants and staff and provide a more fulsome comment in the report back to council prior to the bylaw.
Much appreciated, and thank you, Mr. White, for participating via Zoom. To the clerk, before moving on to members in the gallery, are there any other participants via Zoom for public submissions in support of the CIP? Thank you very much. So now for members in the public, we'll just ask you to, while physical distancing in mind, just make your way to the gallery. Perhaps you can look amongst yourselves in the gallery to identify who would like to come up first. And again, just to state your name and your address for the public record, that would be great. And right now, we are welcoming public comments in support of the community improvement plan.
Excellent, thank you. Oh, sorry. That's okay. Yes, hi. I'm Megan McDonald. I am the Executive Director of Habitat for Humanity Northumberland. I'm actually not a resident of the town of Coburg, so I'm here in my professional capacity, but I'm also the co-chair of the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee, alongside Nancy Johnston, the Executive Director of Cornerstone. I'd like to present support for the CIP on behalf of the Affordable Housing Committee first, and then I'd like to speak on behalf of Habitat. Many of you know the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee is a group of social service agencies and individuals who sit and discuss and really work very hard to identify and push for more affordable housing in our community. We are very pleased to be consulted with on the development of this CIP back in January, and also to have an opportunity to speak with the consultants about it as well leading up to this public meeting. We were also very happy when we saw the release of this CIP to see that many of our comments had been reflected upon, and probably the most important one that has made it into this CIP is the fact that we need a healthy housing continuum. Affordable housing is incredibly important. We are the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee, but we also recognize that this CIP, the proposed CIP, recognizes that we don't just need affordable housing, we need attainable housing, we need rental housing. We have a housing crisis, and everyone knows that. I've stood up here before you saying it, but we need housing across the continuum. And we were pleased to see that this CIP does look to create programs to address that need and to incentivize the creation of many different types of affordable housing. No plan is perfect, but we are really pleased that this plan provides the framework to be able to incentivize those affordable housing options across the spectrum. Many of you probably know that through the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of the agencies that sit at the Affordable Housing Committee are many of the work on the front lines and are supporting some of our most vulnerable who are facing housing crises in the middle of a public health crisis as well. So at our last meeting, they spent a lot of time talking about how we need action. And then we discovered that this was coming in front of you right now. So we would like to put our support behind it. Nancy and I will be providing a formal letter in support of this as well. But while I was here tonight, I wanted to formally say that the Northumberland Affordable Housing Committee is in support of the town of Coburg adopting this community improvement plan. On behalf of Habitat for Humanity, as the Executive Director, our vision is a world where everyone has a decent place to live. And while affordable home ownership is where we tend to, our focus is, we believe, once again, in a strong and healthy housing continuum. And so, while it might seem contrary, we are thrilled to see that this community improvement plan really focuses on the need for purpose-built and affordable rental units. That is the biggest need in our community right now. And so the fact that the main focus is on that is something that we as Habitat, even though that's not our programming, that's what's needed, and we believe in a strong housing continuum. But we are also very, very, very appreciative of the fact that this CIP also recognizes the need for affordable home ownership, and that is part of a healthy housing continuum. We also were really excited to see some creative housing solutions that are included in this CIP, including secondary suite development and renovation and retrofits. You've probably heard me talk many times about how much our existing housing stock has so much opportunity, and so we were happy to see that there are programs that will be geared towards those as well. We appreciate, or I personally appreciate, that the CIP is for the entire town so that it can support multi-housing neighborhoods and mixed income neighborhoods. That is one of the most important things in a healthy community. I also think that the tiered approach to the incentives allows the town to encourage developments that meet the identified, affordable, accessible, and environmental needs of the community. When it comes to implementation, I recognize that the CIP will have administrative impact on the town of Coburg. And one idea that I want to put in front of council and staff as you look at the implementation of this CIP, if it is approved and adopted, is considering partners in the community that can help with the delivery of some of these programs. There are opportunities with some of the not-for-profit organizations in our community who are willing and have expressed that to work with the town to make sure that we are delivering these programs to the people who need it most. Many of your not-for-profit organizations in this community are the ones who know where the need is greatest and who would benefit the most. So there might be an opportunity in the implementation of this plan to partner with those agencies to help deliver some of these programs. Finally, partnerships are going to be the key to a successful affordable housing continuum and with stock. And I think that this CIP, as it has been drafted, provides that, this idea of partnership between not-for-profit organizations, between the municipality, between for-profit developers, and then leveraging that support so that we can access provincial and federal funding is going to be the key, because we have a lot of affordable housing units we need to deliver, and none of us can do it alone. And so as one not-for-profit agency in the community, we're here, we want to work with you, and we're thrilled to see this kind of action being put forward in front of council. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Megan, and thank you for being here on behalf of Northumberland Housing Affordable Committee, which, yes, of course, has advocated to this council time and time again. And thank you for being here on behalf of Habitat, for your enthusiasm as well as your willingness to bring forward some ideas for partnership in terms of implementation. So we look forward to learning more about that as the CIP unfolds. Welcome, Gigi.
Hello, everyone. Gigi Ludorf-Weaver, 703 Carlisle Street in Coburg, Ontario. I'm here in support, and what I'd like to focus on, too, is the incredible, well, to acknowledge, first of all, and to praise the town for its commitment to creating a culture of sustainability. The most recent example, of course, is the affordable housing strategy. So we go back to December of 2019, where the Sustainability and Climate Change Advisory Committee created a definition for the town for sustainability, and it goes as follows. Sustainability is environmental, economic, and social cultural actions that meet the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So I think this CIP program is one of those strategies that can put meat on the bones of that definition. On that very same day, on December 4th, 2019, there was also a declaration for the climate emergency, which was a motion that was upheld by the council. So this, again, typifies the culture of sustainability that is being expressed in the actions of council. So there is also a huge global movement that I'm sure everybody here is aware of, and that is the United Nations sustainability goals. And one of those goals is goal number 11, which is for sustainable cities and communities. And again, what do we mean by sustainability? Cobourg Council knows exactly what sustainability means and is able to proudly stand in line with a global organization like the United Nations, where you will, I believe, be able to meet that goal of the goal for the Vision 2030 that the United Nations has challenged all communities to meet, to create communities and cities that are sustainable. In addition, Jennifer Kismat, who was the planner for Toronto for years, has also presented a declaration for resilience for Canadian cities, which I spoke with our MP, Philip Lawrence, about. So in that regard, having those end goals in sight, I think that our council is moving in really large steps towards achieving that worldview of sustainable cities and communities and resilience. The second part, I want to show that there are some inconsistencies and sometimes lack of thorough explanations with regards to, for example, the official plan. the strategic plan, the Downtown Coburg Master Plan, the Community Improvement Plan, the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan. All of those plans have huge components around sustainability. So they are strategic, they are well thought out. But as I read through, for example, some of the other documents, it becomes more and more hazy because the reference is not made to your definition of sustainability. I couldn't even find the definition of sustainability for this town. I mean, I had to phone Minnie de Jong because she's the chair of that committee, but I eventually did find it because I'm extremely persistent. So in the draft review for the Downtown Coburg Master Plan, it poses a question. It says, if Downtown Coburg is to be successfully rebranded as a desirable target for residential and commercial investment, all new building and public realm development must incorporate the highest quality design possible, contribute to sustainable development, and inspire an authentic sense of place. I mean, I couldn't have said it better myself. But again, the reference to sustainability. When we look at the official plan, Section 2, Community Vision, Principles and Objectives, we get to the vision statement, Section 2, an emphasis on sustainable, accessible, and compact development, particularly transit-supportive, mixed-use built form along its main streets, which will enable Coburg to enhance its function as a vibrant, environmentally aware urban center. Again, a reference to sustainability and a reference to the high mark that Coburg wants to achieve in terms of its plans for the future for its residents and the builders. So in this CIP, I want to know what are the comprehensive, flexible components of the plan that will assist in the development and enhancement of affordable and rental housing, because it says that, and I didn't understand what that meant. And then I think I've learned a little bit more this evening about who will establish this plan. I'm going to quote from the CIP literature. It will establish a coordinated and strategic mechanism utilizing the most effective tools available through the Planning Act and will focus on affordable housing, accessibility and visibility, urban design and sustainability, brownfield, social and cultural well-being, and implementation, governance, marketing, and monitoring, which is a mouthful. And what I'm trying to suggest is using that umbrella definition that you have adopted for sustainability, you can make this much more accessible in terms of understanding what you're trying to achieve by saying, we are going to be environmental stewards. We are working with Ganaraska Conservation Authority when it is required. We are socially responsible, and we are concerned that we demonstrate economic resilience, because those are the three components that you need for any action in order to call it sustainable. And that does not come through in a lot of the documents from the town. So I think also what I wanted to mention is this comparison between a culture of conservation being a principle of sustainability. That is a problem in terms of understanding what that is supposed to mean. The culture of conservation has to do with preserving, whereas sustainability is something that is going to go on according to our Indigenous elders for at least 7 generations. So it just seems to me that there is confusion around how to find an overarching, you have that overarching vision, but it's not connected to so many of the documents that you have so painstakingly produced for the betterment of our town and our citizens. And I think it would just be really helpful for not just the public, but for staff and for everyone to understand this is what we stand for as a town. We declare that there's a climate emergency. We know it's serious. We know greenhouse gases are a problem. We know that there are several components of sustainability that we absolutely need to adhere to, and that part of that is our social responsibility is for this area of affordable housing. Of course, Sustainable Cobourg applauds that tremendously. Now we get to an area when we see the town of Coburg affordable housing strategy, which is really about Northumberland County, there is not one word of sustainability, not one. So to me, it is a devaluation. It's not only a devaluation of what we stand for in this town, but it is a devaluation of our vision. And I strongly suggest that this represents a complete disconnect between what we as Coburgians see and have been on this journey for the last 10 years to establish our commitment to sustainability and to creating a culture of sustainability. And I think that needs to be addressed. In conclusion, I just want to, if I can find it, read you a letter. I want to leave you with some suggestions. This is from our Vice President, Jeremy Clark, who has a company called Simple Life Homes. And he says, my general thought is that the county as a whole should be considering the materials used and the energy efficiency levels set for all of the affordable housing units being built. Net zero homes should be a minimum, and the goal should be homes built to the passive house standard, which you're doing with the building by, what was it, the Coast Guard, that's it. And also, one of our concerns too that we discussed about this CIP plan and the movement towards this momentum to create affordable housing is our concern about waste. How is the construction waste going to be, there's no mention, we couldn't find it. We couldn't find how waste was going to be dealt with, because waste is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases, and there are ways of mitigating that you probably will find out about.
Gigi?
Yes?
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Just we're coming up to about a 10-minute time limit, so.
I'm almost done,
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks. So Jeremy continues, we are seeing more and more projects throughout Southern Ontario being built at competitive construction costs to be net zero and or passive house buildings, and it simply takes a well-intentioned approach and a design to suit. We saw the design of the recently approved Coast Guard building approved as a passive house build, which is fantastic, but the design of the building was extremely overbuilt. As the request by the town was it to be biddable by many different contractors. It could have been simplified and significantly more affordable to build if that very biddable approach was reviewed more thoroughly. To simplify, all new construction, especially town-owned, should be built with healthy materials, avoiding foam insulations, and be designed to be net zero energy ready. This can be achieved at competitive build costs and done by union carpenters with no new training if union labor is a requirement. The design firm selected should already be trained for this work to ensure the design and construction costs do not become exorbitant. I applaud you. I encourage you. I am hopeful that my message is received in the spirit in which it was given. Thank you.
Thank you, Gigi. Much appreciated as always. And if you have any written material that you'd like to submit to the clerk, we'll ensure that that gets to the consultants and the director. Thank you very much. Any other members of the public? Yes.
Oh, my mask. Thanks.
And just a kind reminder, we're trying to work within a 10-minute time period, so I'll let you know when you're coming up to that
10 would
time.
be nice. I was arranging for 5.
Welcome. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Ben Bird, and I live at 774 Ontario Street in Coburg. Just let me start off by quoting from the county, where it says on their website, talking about their housing needs, it says that data indicates that 48% of local renter households are spending 30% or more on housing costs. And more importantly, the wait list for subsidized housing has expanded by over 260% since 2008, with approximately 1,000 households now on this list. The demand for units is highest in the town of Cobourg, where the wait is now approximately 9 years. Now, I would like to congratulate everybody involved in getting the CIP in place, simply because it provides the legislative framework where we can now move on. The question is, at what speed do we move at? I had a couple of questions, and they've both been answered. I do believe that Mr. Lamar is going to give out some of my material after I've spoken. It is going to be amended, so you should read it and then sort of you just scan it as background, because some of this stuff that I wrote out may or may not be in the address. Okay. The first question I had was that the same question as Councillor Chorley had. If you have 30 units a year, how much is it going to cost us to provide the subsidies and the grants and everything else? From listening to Mr. McGlashan and the Deputy Mayor, it appears that 125,000 has been budgeted, and Mr. McGlashan, says it may go to 250,000 in its full bloom. Now, that's what I heard at the back. The hearing was quite difficult, so that may not be right. But the question out of that background is, when can we expect the grants to pay for themselves? Because there is an element of cost recovery in the CIP. And secondly, the other question I had was talking about Coburg doing an in-house program, as opposed in collaboration with the county, but not abdicating their responsibility to the county, but doing it on behalf of Coburg. And the answer to that was Mr. McGlashan, I'm very glad to hear, added the fact that yes, we can donate land if and when somebody comes along and says, I want to do a project. And that's in the CIP. And I think that's a very good idea. Now to the statement. It's now 2 years after the last election, where the issue of affordable housing was a moving force, and we are at this point examining the use of a CIP and how to build affordable housing. That means we are on the way to building housing and administering programs that can move the 1,000 people on the wait list into housing as soon as possible. I'm somewhat skeptical about how fast we move, because I've read the CIP executive summary and concluded that Council, once having set up the grant programs, some of them are at arm's length from Council. Some of the housing to be built will be built, in fact, all of the housing to be built will be built by the private sector, and the programs administered by Coburg's planning staff. I would suggest that relying on the private sector for a regular build program is very risky, simply because we don't have private developers beating down the doors saying, give me your money, I want to build houses. It just doesn't happen. They go ahead and build on their own program when they feel like it, and if there's a government grant giving the money, they'll say, sure, I will take it if it helps me. Take, for instance, the Balder project. 70 units have been approved. 10 of them, in fact, are supposed to be affordable. The question I have is, who defines affordable? Where will the subsidy to make up the difference in rents of those affordable units when compared to the market rent, where will the subsidy come from? Secondly, Also, if Mr. Balder is very successful in his efforts, he may want to sell the building. What happens to the 10 units then? Is there a covenant in the deed that says there will be 10 units in perpetuity, or will they go the way of the private sector? And we do know that under rent controls, somebody buys it, somebody buys the new building, everything's up for grabs. So, most of all, most important is just how many other units are going to get built by builders. We have had in our official plan for I don't know how many years now, but we've had recommendations and encouragements and somewhat of a mandate to say that developments shall include 10% affordable housing. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. I'm right, okay. Have we had any developments lately at all that have come before us and said, I've got 10% affordable housing in my development? We haven't. So what I'm saying is to depend on the private sector is all very well and good, but it's somewhat risky if you want to move any of those people off the 1,000 person wait list. And there's an alternative, and I've spoken to some of you about this before, where the provision of housing depends on many things: the cost of land, the cost of construction, the cost of regulation. And if we do it in a public manner, we can eliminate the cost of regulation, and if we have convertible public land, it eliminates the cost of land acquisition. Now, builders will tell you that one of the major costs of building is, in fact, the cost of land. We have land in the municipality, and here's the solution that I'm suggesting, and it can be stated in one sentence. Take some of our public land, use some of the money that spins off the Northern Industrial Park and Holdco, and build the units ourselves. Let's flesh that out a bit. Take some public land, and I would suggest we have two sources of available land immediately. One of them is the lawns that we cut at great expense inside the industrial park. We've just built a nice fancy road along the south side of it. It's very easy to say, okay, we'll take a couple of acres of that green land north of the Home Hardware and build some units on it. If you don't like that idea, we can go to the tannery lands. We've been looking for private sector investment on the tannery lands ever since we assumed it. Have we had any interest? I doubt it very much. Okay, Glenn's shaking his head. If that's good, then that's good. But it's taken how long to get that interest? The point is that we do have available land and on the tannery, and not all of it is a brownfield. And if you say we can't really afford anything, in next week's Committee of the Whole, you'll be looking at the financial statements of the Northern Industrial Park, where you will see that in June of this year, we transferred $887,100 into town revenue. So don't tell me we don't have money. We also have the Holdco in dividend, which has been suspended for this year and maybe next year. We have some money in the Holdco reserve fund. So we don't have, it's not as though we don't have money. We have money, we have the land, we need the political will to build the units. Now, just imagine how much cheaper the total cost of a unit is when it doesn't depend on the cost of the land or the profit margin demanded by the developer, and eliminates the cost of regulation. And I don't see that alternative in this particular presentation inside the CIP. That's why I came down to tell you that I think that should be. Now, you may want to dismiss this presentation out of hand because you say that you have no jurisdiction, the town of Coburg, in public housing because the county does. That's a county responsibility. We're going to collaborate with the county. How many times have we heard the planners and the politicians say in answer to the problem of affordable housing, yes, we're working on it, but in collaboration with the county? Well, I don't think the county is working very hard at it, and I'll give you an example, and I don't think they're going to be very efficient at it. If we look at the Elgin Park redevelopment, which is going to take place on Elgin Street, they're going to knock down 9 buildings, 9 duplexes, 18 families. They're going to take 18 families out of the mix, transfer them someplace else, and move them into 4 10-unit buildings. Okay? So that's 40 units. So you'd say, that's great. We got 8 knocked down 18, we're going to get 40. But the problem is, that those 4 units are going to be mixed, market rental and affordable. We don't know the ratio, but just looking at it as I see it, if the ratio is 50-50, market use, market rental, and 50% low income, you've only gained 2 units. And how much does it cost to demolish 9 duplexes and build 4 low-rise apartments? That's when I talk about efficiency and cost, that's a county program. Do we really want to be associated with that if that's the way they're going to do it? And we're not even talking about moving anybody in until probably 18 months, 2 years' time. So, what I'm saying here to say is that yes, we have a made-in-Coburg solution. We should be getting on with it. And if you don't like the idea of administering them, once these, however many units you decide, if you have the political will, to build on our available land with our available money, if you don't want to administer them, hand them over to the county. Let them administer them. The point is that we've got 1,000 people on a wait list that is going to take 9 years to clear. And I'll put money on it that in 9 years' time there's going to be probably 4 times that many, the way public housing or private sector housing is being built. So I have come along to tell you guys that there is a better way, there's a faster way, and all you need is the political will to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bird, for your passion and some out-of-the-box ideas. I don't know, to the director, did you want to clarify on, I know for example, the 250,000 and the 125,000, just to let you know, Mr. Bird, 250,000 was the budget amount allocated in the 2019 budget for affordable housing, and the 125,000 was the amount allocated for 2020. Just to clarify those 2 numbers. Okay, thank you. Anyone else from the public in the gallery in support? Yep, please come forward and just state your name and address for the public record, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to hear the CIP plan, which I just, my name's Lou Ledenick, and I live at 15 Orchard Avenue. I have just recently heard about the CIP plan last week, I think it was, from our local radio station, and that's how I got the information to come here. So I really haven't or don't know of the CIP plan yet. I am looking to try and renovate my house and put a rental unit in, but I think I'd like to get some information of this CIP plan, read it, and see if I can qualify for any of that plan that is happening or going to happen in the next year or 2 or 3.
Absolutely. Thank you for, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
You know what? I'm good, thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. And welcome to Council Chambers. And just for clarity, maybe just for some background reading for yourself, if you go to engagecoburg.ca, there's each program, and including the secondary suites, is broken down into PDFs that you can read it in detail. And just to emphasize that right now that this is at the draft stage, so it has yet to be endorsed or implemented by council. So none of the programs are yet available to homeowners. However, for the secondary suites, engagecoburg.ca is a great source of information for the draft opportunities that might fit for you. And then if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to get in touch at nbd@coburg.ca or forward your questions and comments to the clerk at coburg.ca. We can add them to the consultations. You can also participate directly on engagecoburg.ca by asking any questions or adding any ideas. Any other questions or comments from members in the gallery? Hello, Keith. Nice to see you, as always.
Good evening. Great to be here. Madam Chair, members of council, staff, consultants, my fellow members of the public. My name is Keith Oliver, 327 Walton Street. Anybody that wants to get in touch with me, my number's in the phone book, which is kind of unusual these days, but it's there, and I'd be happy to discuss anything I have to say with anyone. The first thing that I want to say unequivocally is that policy is important and that this CIP is especially important. I want to say, and I want to ask you to remember that it's also only a framework, a pathway to a solution to the housing crisis. And the question on everyone's mind now is, what is next? Now, I'm sure you know the facts, but they're worthwhile repeating. Year after year, as the waiting list for affordable housing grows longer and longer, and as the price of existing housing increases, what people are asking, without question, what people are asking, where is the solution? How do we get there? And basically, what's next? The present solution focuses on housing needs of a rather narrow group of citizens or families, when in fact, the need is increasing across a number of classes. Income groups now in the middle range are having difficulty finding sustainable, suitable, and affordable housing. I know of several couples, several families, whose income together, each family, their combined income, is in the range of $100,000, and they're having difficulty finding suitable housing. The present solution focuses on the housing needs of this narrow group, when in fact it goes well beyond that. It relies on government support. Now, a recent example is the allocation of $3 billion by the federal government over the next 5 years to be applied across Canada and create more affordable housing. By its own calculation, this $3 billion will result in only 3,000 more units. In normal times, the demand will have far outstripped that supply over the next 5 years, and as we know, these are not normal times. The problem that has long faced us, and which we seem reluctant to recognize, is that governments cannot effectively sustain this kind of support forever. Government support may be necessary to a degree and in the short term, but it is not the solution. Government programs come and go. The real solution lies beyond government, and that solution is up to us. We can only understand and solve a problem if we understand its underlying causes, and I believe that is not happening. I believe there is something fundamentally wrong with the housing market, and that nothing will change until that aberration is fully identified, understood, and corrected. How can this be in a free enterprise economy where historically the response to an increase in demand has always been an increase in supply? In the case of affordable housing for all, this is simply not happening. While the economy can produce something as complicated as an automobile, with parts made in various countries around the world and put one, if not two, in every driveway, the same economy does not seem capable of satisfying the clear demand for housing. Why? Is it the cost of land, of not taking the advantage of or further developing production and technology efficiencies in the housing industry? To what degree is not doing so a matter of scale? And how can this be addressed by cooperation between developers? Is it the difference between income groups? Is it the influence of individuals coming to Coburg to retire and doing so from Toronto, as welcome as they are? Is it the lack of a variety of housing? To what degree is the NIMBY syndrome a factor in challenging a healthy mix of housing types within our community? Is it the result of growth and development policies and zoning bylaws that are too prescriptive and, as a consequence, does not allow enough latitude for new and creative solutions? Is it simply that the housing industry is satisfied with the status quo and the long run of its success since the heady days of growth and prosperity that followed World War II? Have those who are satisfied grown indifferent to the needs of others? Have we failed to acknowledge affordable and stable housing as a human right? My recommendation, after all of this, to the Council is that it take up a leadership role and, along with others, find partners in this duty and establish a round table on affordable housing for all. This would involve an exchange of experience and ideas through a series of meetings that were open to all, from those most directly affected to those most capable of making change, and to inspire cooperation, innovation, and meaningful change. It may be in, can't read my writing, it may be, all right. The final question, if Council doesn't take the leadership role, I'm thrilled that Council has got involved in the affordable housing issue to the extent it has. We can't just fob it off on the county. This affects people here. Half the population of the county lives in Coburg, and I'm gratified that Council has seen fit to take this on. But if Council doesn't take this leadership role, who will? Now, I have, that's the extent of my remarks, except I want to say just one or two things. You're going to have a package. Mr. Larmer, have you passed that out? All right. You can look at this afterwards. I'm leaving with you a package of material that shows what innovation, what positive steps others have taken in addressing the problem of supply and variety, and in fact, creating better neighborhoods. Just examples here that we have in Coburg. I've added an addenda sheet, and I list 6 addresses in Coburg that have produced great solutions to adding units without changing the character of the street. I refer to this as setback and add-on housing. And I've given you the addresses. I would encourage you just to go and take a peek and see that, in fact, it's so sensitively done, so well done, especially because we have such deep blocks here in Coburg, that the character of the street is maintained. I've also given you an example of how streetscape can be addressed in the staggered frontage that you'll find at 159 to 167 Albert Street. When it comes to innovation, which is something we have to open the door to innovation, let the ideas fly. And I cite, for example, in Toronto, on Avenue Road, anybody going in to Toronto, take a turn down Avenue Road and look at Bedford Glen, which is on the corner of Woburn Avenue and have a look at the Oakland's Atrium Apartments on Avenue and Cottingham. Elsewhere, and there's a long history to this, there is a publication that outlines an initiative taken by two professors in architecture at the University of McGill, in which they generated something, a new housing type called a grow home. I have a book on it, if anyone is interested. Over 10,000 of these units, which address affordability, flexibility, and quality of life, over 10,000 of them have been built in Montreal. We also have design and planning.
Mr. Oliver, I apologize to interrupt you, but we're just passing the 10-minute mark, so if you can just make your closing remarks, that would be great. Thank you.
I have included a package on the Waterloo Region Green Home. This was built in 1993, and it contains the addresses and contacts for all kinds of innovations that took place in that wonderful home. There is the Grow Cottage. There is the Court Garden House, a different type of housing that we have experienced. And there is also the Unser condominium, which is a lot more sophisticated, but shows how the mass production of concrete panels can give you an incredible quality of home. That's the end of my remarks. I encourage you to look through the material at your leisure, and I would so hope that you will continue this effort through a round table initiative.
Thank you, Keith, for ensuring and pushing the leadership and the accountability to this council. Much appreciated. And as always, for the additional literature for us to read through. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome. To the clerk, just before I go on to remarks in opposition to the CIP, is there anyone else via Zoom who would like to participate? Okay. My apologies, I was just pulling up the agenda. Moving on to item number 2 under public submissions. If there are any members of the public in the gallery who would like to come up and make comments in opposition to the CIP. Seeing none, and again, Mr. Lummer, just to ensure no one via Zoom. Okay. Thank you very much. And just staying with the clerk, on to item number 3 under public submissions, written submissions and correspondence received by yourself as of printing of the agenda. Or to the deputy clerk, my apologies.
No problem. So, Madam Chair, we received 4 items of correspondence which have been circulated to members of council. We received the one from Adam White, as well from Northumberland County, as well as correspondence from Ben Bird and Keith Oliver. They will be made part of the record and attached to the minutes.
Thank you very much. Going on to item number 4, to the Director of Planning and Development Services. Mr. McGlashan, any written submissions received by yourself or the Planning Department from commenting agencies?
Madam Chair, excuse me, Ms. Christopher has outlined the fact that the County of Northumberland has submitted a a fairly extensive written submission in favor and support of the town CIP project. I believe that's in your package as well.
Yes, and thank you to the county for their fulsome letter to members of council. That concludes the public meeting, the formal procedures of the formal meeting. Moving along into further notice, just all of those attendants at home and with us this evening, all persons requiring notice of passage of the Town of Coburg's Affordable and Rental Housing Community Improvement Plan are to advise the clerk of their name and address to ensure receipt of notice. And you can always get in touch with the clerk's department at clerk@cobourg.ca. Moving along, I will call for an adjournment of this evening's public meeting. Councillor Darling, all in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Stay safe and have a good night.